Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first session of Tea and Transformations. And from the off, let me just say that I've got two cameras running. I'm live on Instagram and I'm live on YouTube, which is why I'm looking in different directions. This session today is my first ever Tea and Transformations. And I'm really excited about this because it is hopefully a way for you and I to connect in a new and laid back way. So I I've kind of been feeling a bit frustrated when you go on social media, it's there's so much junk out there. It's full of AI, all sorts of rubbish information, all sorts of conflicting information. And it's really difficult to know what on earth you're supposed to be doing. Like, how do you even fuel your body in a way that looks after your long term health, but also makes you feel good right now? And I also feel like alongside all of that conflicting, confusing information out there, there's just so much disconnect. Everything that we see is highly edited and highly scripted and planned. And there's not a lot of just kind of natural, um, conversational stuff out there for us to engage with where we can actually ask questions and be part of the content. So I really wanted to just show up in a different way and see how it goes, see how it feels for me and for everyone else. I really wanted a way of connecting with real people, rather than showing up in a really structured way like I often do on my weekly webinars, on my podcast, or just short reels. So that's why I'm doing this. And it's kind of going to just play out how it plays out. We're going to see how it evolves. What I would love is that in time, people ask me questions in the chat as we go along, and I, coach as best I can, given that it's a bit one way, but give you guidance and tips based on where you're at right now and what you're struggling with right now. And that could be that people are sending me questions in the moment, or it could be that they're submitting them ahead of time and I'm breaking down a more complex question. So this is something that can evolve as there is a need for it, and as people tell me what they want and how they need support and how they want me to show up. For today, I have got some points to talk about, because I haven't got any pre-submitted questions, given that this is the very first Tea and Transformations. Part of the reason why I've called it Tea and Transformations, by the way, is because I absolutely love tea. And, whenever you see me online, there's a very good chance there's a cup of tea next to me. And it really just kind of embodies the cozy vibe that I wanted for this session, where we just sit down, have a cuppa, and have a chat. So, what I want to cover today is some of the hidden weight loss blockers, the things that can cause us to have stubborn weights that aren't always talked about enough or in enough detail with enough context. We're always told that it's calories, just eat less, just move more, and you'll lose the weight. And pretty much every plan or diet out there ignores the fact that there is a hell of a lot more to losing weight and maintaining weight loss than just cutting calories or just exercising more. And actually, if we ignore those things, then we make our lives a lot more difficult, and we can set ourselves up not only for even more stubborn weight and weight gain, but also worsening symptoms. And we can almost put ourselves on the fast track to burnout and, fatigue and worsened hormonal symptoms as well. So, the first hidden weight loss blocker is hormones, which I guess this sort of thing is everywhere. It's all over the internet, and we hear hormones, the term hormones, and things about hormones being thrown around all over the place. And when we say hormones, I think most people immediately think of estrogen, or one of the sex hormones, or the sex hormones as a collection. But when we're talking about the impact of hormones, really, what I'm talking about is all of the hormones, and there's many, many different hormones that are involved in your fat burning, from the sex hormones, which do play quite a big role, to your stress hormones and your thyroid hormones and your hunger hormones and your blood sugar hormones, and then even your brain chemicals, which are also hormones. They all play a role in their own way, and some of them are directly linked to the ways that our body burns and stores fats, whereas others are more linked to our appetite control and kind of what we do with that food and where we store the fats. So sex hormones specifically, we're really talking about your estrogens, your progesterones, testosterones, and these have a big impact on where we store our fats. And as we get past 35 and getting into our 40s and beyond, there's some quite big shifts that happen for women, and typically overall our estrogen levels start to decline, our progesterone levels also start to decline, and testosterone can go with it too. And essentially what that results in is it being a lot more challenging for us to maintain our weight, because when our estrogen levels drop particularly, that makes us much more likely to have issues with our blood sugar control. It makes us much more susceptible to stress, and it makes us more likely to be impacted by stress in terms of our health and the balance in our bodies. And, along with that, our thyroids tend to suffer as a side effect of these hormonal changes during this transition period. So there's all these changes that happen to our hormones during this stage, and that makes it much more difficult to manage our weight. And the thing is that what we're told, and what we typically do as a default when we're trying to lose weight, is we start cutting back. We start eating less, managing portions, counting points, or maybe we start upping the exercise, burning more calories, doing more intense exercise, doing more sessions per week. And in many ways, it's the opposite of what we actually need, because those actions can put the body under significant stress. When we cut our calories much lower than what we need, or we start working out very intensely, our body sees that as a stress signal. It's not getting enough fuel, and it's having to expend a lot of energy. So your body can go into conservation mode, where it's trying to protect its own resources, ensuring that we're not going to run out of resources, we're not going to waste away. And one of the ways that our body does that, because it's so clever and adaptable, is it starts to reduce the output of hormones, because we make our hormones, we make them from the food we eat, and it's a very energy intensive process. So, one of the ways in which our body can protect us from this threat of the sudden undereating and overexercising is by reducing the output of our hormones. And again, that could be our sex hormones and, particularly our thyroid hormones. Those are two groups of hormones that really suffer when we're under fueling and under nourishing our bodies. So that is one of the reasons. And, this is probably one of the most common struggles that I see. This is why so many women that I speak to are working out harder than ever and eating less than ever, but they're gaining weight or they just can't shift the weight. And for some women, it shows up as whatever they do, whether they are on a diet or whether they are just not bothering because nothing works, nothing happens. They don't lose weight, they don't gain weight, their body is just stuck. It's like their metabolism has left the building and nothing budges. Let me know if you've experienced that. Drop an emoji in the comments. I want to know what you're struggling with so that I can speak to your specific struggles. So these changes in hormones are a key way in which this happens. Now, the second hidden hormone, the second hidden weight loss blocker really goes hand in hand with this, because the second one is stress and cortisol. And as we, whatever age we are, if we're under stress, that makes it a lot more challenging for your body to thrive, and it makes it a lot more challenging for your body to burn fat. And part of the reason for that is because when we're under stress, one of the ways that our body responds to stress is to ensure that we've got lots of energy available. Because when we were cavemen, stress meant that we were either running from a tiger, running from some sort of threat, running for our lives, fighting, or there was a famine, there was not enough food available. And, whatever that threat is, the response is the same, and that is that our cortisol levels increase. And so the response that happens in the body is we start breaking down our muscle tissue in order to have some very readily available energy so that we can either get through the famine or we can run from that tiger, and we've got lots of energy available to get us through that. But in today's world, we're not generally running from a tiger. We're not generally at the point of starving ourselves. Okay, we might be under eating, but we might not be starving ourselves. The stress that we typically experience is sitting in traffic, or maybe it's emotional stress or financial stress, not things where we need that hit of energy and we need all that readily available blood sugar. So the response that we have to stress, unfortunately, it's still the same as it was back when we were cavemen. And that means that it isn't serving us in the way that it was intended. And all of that energy that we don't need gets stored as fat around your middle. So this is one of the reasons why you'll see phrases like cortisol belly being bandied around, and one of the reasons why you hear people talking about how when we're under stress, we're much more likely to put on fat around the middle. And another reason why this can happen is because, whether it's because of the first thing I was talking about with our hormones changing, our sex hormones changing, or whether it's to do with our stress levels being elevated, both of those things increase insulin resistance, or make it more difficult for your body to balance blood sugar levels. And that also makes us more prone to putting on fat around the middle. So it's a double whammy, isn't it? Because not only have we got our sex hormones changing, but we're also less resilient to stress during this time of life, partly because of how our hormones change, but also the chances are you're probably experiencing more stress than ever when you're in this kind of 40s, 50s, maybe 60s time of life. Because for many women, what that looks like is having young children or maybe even grown up children. It looks like oftentimes having aging parents that you're needing to support, maybe still working full time, still running a household, and all the other things that typically can go on. Maybe it's divorces, maybe it's bereavements. These are all things that start becoming a little bit more common, unfortunately, during this life phase. So there's a lot of stress going on. There's a lot on your shoulders. And at the same time, you're going through this transition with your hormones. So it's all, a triple whammy to make it more likely that you're going to gain weight, and that is also going to go on around your middle. Now, the point of this is not to make you feel like you're a lost cause, or like it's too much to contend with, because I promise you there's so much that you can do. But for now, this is more about just helping you to understand why you're finding it so difficult to shift the weight, and we'll certainly come on to talking about what to do about it. Now, the third thing that can also make it more challenging to lose weight is your diet history and your metabolism. So, if you're someone who has done a lot of diets and gained weight, lost weight quite a few times over the past few decades, then that does have an impact on your metabolism, because every time we lose weight, we tend to lose muscle with it. When we're losing fat, when we're losing weight, we're not just losing fat, we're losing muscle with it. And, with your typical diet, about 40% of the weight that you lose is actually muscle. And when we inevitably put that weight back on again, unfortunately, the vast majority of what we gain is fat. So we don't tend to regain that muscle unless we're really going out of our way to build muscle with consistent strength training. And muscle is very metabolically active. It's burning calories all the time. So if you aren't taking those steps to rebuild your muscle, then unfortunately your metabolism slowly declines as you keep gaining and losing weight. So your metabolism is a big factor, and with the hormone changes, it also makes it more challenging to hold on to muscle. When your estrogen level drops, estrogen is very protective of muscles. So less estrogen means less muscle over time. So these are all reasons why it does become more challenging to keep the weight off when you're in this stage of life. And it can feel overwhelming to try and contend with that and battle that. Which is why there is so much advice out there around what to do. And, there's definitely no one path to addressing those issues. And the solution looks different for everyone. For one person, it might be that they need to focus on what is it that's causing them to struggle to regulate their appetite, or struggle to get into the gym consistently. Is it that they've got sleep issues and they're not consistently getting 7 to 8 hours sleep per night? Because if that's the case, then that's a really good place to start. Because lack of sleep makes it more likely that we're going to stress eat and comfort eat. It raises our stress levels, so it exacerbates the problem when it comes to your sex hormones and your thyroid and your blood sugars. So if you're not sleeping properly, then that's a really, really good place to start. If you're someone who has got a lot of stress, okay, we can't get rid of that stress, but there's plenty that you can do to support your body through that stress. And I'm not going to pretend there's a simple fix for that, but there's certainly plenty that can be done, from looking at how well you manage stress to doing stress relieving activities, which can be as simple as doing deep belly breaths and doing some diaphragmatic breathing a few times a day for a minute or two. It sounds really basic and simple, but actually it has been shown to lower your cortisol levels. So really simple things like that can be weaved into your routine to help support your stress management. And simple things like adding in a magnesium supplement. It's not often I make blanket recommendations when it comes to supplements because everyone is so different. But magnesium is one of the few supplements where you can pretty safely say that pretty much everyone would benefit from taking it, especially if you're someone at this stage of life, because when we are stressed, we really burn through magnesium so quickly. Our demand for magnesium is really high, and magnesium is a very calming mineral. So if we don't have enough of it, then we can be more prone to feeling more anxious and wired and, struggling to manage our stress response. But when we supplement it, then it can actually have a really lovely calming effect. It can help aid sleep and get you into deeper sleep. So definitely something to consider if you are under significant stress. So the point that I want to make here is that there's not like a, do this, this, and this to address these hidden causes of stubborn weight, because what works for you will be different for everyone, because what is causing the problem for you is probably different to what's causing it for other people. Maybe it's sleep, maybe it's stress, maybe it's that you're not eating enough protein, maybe it's that the strength training isn't enough or you're not lifting heavy enough. It's so nuanced when it comes to nutrition. And one of the things about me and my work is that I'm kind of a boring nutritionist in that I don't make any blanket statements, and I don't take anything to extremes. So, I'm never going to be someone who says like you've got to cut out this food or you've got to go on the carnivore diet or the keto diet or any diet as such, because that's just not going to actually get to the root cause of the problem you're experiencing. While someone might feel better on certain diets, most diets will cut out something, whether it's an entire food group or a type of food, but it's just removing the trigger rather than addressing the root cause of the issue. And actually, what I do in my work is help women to address those root causes so that they can, actually digest their food better, absorb it better, and meet their nutritional needs through real food rather than having to survive on a restricted diet, which is just miserable and, not sustainable in the long term. I'm not someone who believes in doing anything where you're going to end up yo-yoing and going on it and coming off of it because it doesn't fit in with normal life. You shouldn't need to have a clear, empty diary to be able to, follow a plan. It should fit in with your life rather than you having to fit in with the steps that are involved. So that's why, the guidance that I give here, it is going to be somewhat vague in general, unless you ask me specific questions, and I'll do my best to be as specific as possible with answering them. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover today. I hope it's been interesting and a good insight into why you might be experiencing stubborn weight. And if you're not already, then make sure you hit follow if you're watching on Instagram, and hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And I am going to be here every Monday around about 6 o'clock, maybe 6:30, but it will be confirmed in advance. to just talk about a different subject, and in time hopefully go through your questions. You guys can submit your questions in advance, so I can talk about specific issues that you're having and helping you, to really meet you where you're at. So if you've got something that you're struggling with, if you are having challenges, send me a message, send me a DM, or leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube, and let me know what's going on for you. What have you tried? What is the experience you're having when you're trying to lose weight? Or maybe it's not to do with weight, maybe it's to do with symptoms that you're experiencing. And let me know what you've tried and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and then I can break that down for you and help you to kind of figure out what angles you might want to explore or look at in the future. So as I say, DM me, let me know. Good to see a few of you saying that it's helped. That's really lovely to hear. And thank you for joining me as well. I wasn't necessarily expecting anyone to show up today, with it being my first session. But yeah, I'll be here each week. I would love to see you back again. And as I say, send me your questions and we will personalize these sessions to you as much as possible, and kind of just have a conversation as we go through. So thanks again. Have a wonderful evening. Oh, just one more thing for me to let you know about is that in half an hour at 7:30, I am going to be running a masterclass where I'm going to be going through things in a bit more of a structured way and expanding on what I've been talking about today. So if you want to join me for that, then just head to the link in my bio on Instagram. If you're watching on YouTube, hop over to Instagram and search Louise Digby Nutrition. And then in my bio, you'll see a link to the masterclass, and it's at 7:30 today. So I will see you there if you fancy that as well. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you really soon. Bye.